Back? Nope. Got it figured out? Okay. So we've got an election coming up. You've seen all the yard signs, the TV ads, the YouTube ads, right? Now, I haven't been eligible to vote in as many presidential elections as some of you have. But there's one thing I've noticed since I've been old enough to pay attention. It seems like this is always the most important election we have ever faced, right? And there's always some huge issue going on that's defining our country that they're telling us we're voting on, right? And if this side wins, well, it's just the end of democracy as we know it. And if this side wins, well, it's the end of democracy as we know it, right? So it's interesting. It's always the most important, most defining election. I want to share with you some headlines that I pulled. And now this is church, so to keep things neutral, any names that were in these headlines, I just changed to Jones. Okay, so it's just going to say Jones. And you can decide for yourself if you think you know who this headline's talking about. So let's see the first one. Jones extremism touted as risk to national security. Think you know who this is? Let's see it, Jacob. Arizona's very own Goldwater. This is an article from the New York Times, October of 1964. Let's see another one. Jones, radical protests pose a threat to democracy. Think you've got this one figured out? Now you don't. Let's see it. Nixon. All right. The quiz is still going, so we'll see. 1 out of 2. October 1969. Let's see our next one. Public confidence in Washington at an all-time low. Jones vows change. Let's see. That was Carter, 1976. All right, let's see this next one. We don't have a Jones in this one. Wave of anti-immigration sentiment sweeps nation, driven by hate. When do you think this one? Let's see it. June of 1923. All right, I got just a couple more for you. Jones under fire for handling of Israel-Palestine conflict. All right, let's see. That one's Bush, 1991. Next one. Jones warns radical agenda will destroy American freedom. Let's see who that one is. Nixon again, 1972. Another one for you. Jones warns of dangerous precedent in disputed election. This one's an easy one. Yep, that's Gore. Election of 2000. All right, last one for you. Jones warns of global threats to democratic values. Who's that? Roosevelt, 1939. Thanks, Jacob. So it kind of seems like the more things change, the more they seem to stay the same, right? So here's the thing. The media, the headlines, they're designed to get clicks and shares on social media. Before it was some shocking headline made you want to pause and buy that newspaper to read it. And so the more outrageous, the more divisive these headlines are, the more they catch our attention. The media sells fear. That doesn't mean we have to buy it. So I want to tell you a story that happened in May of 2020. Now, in case you forgot, here's what was going on in May of 2020. We were at the height of COVID. There were protests across the country about the stay-at-home orders and all these businesses being shut down. People were fearful, right? People were arguing over masks and whether or not we should wear them. I think by May, the lack of toilet paper in the grocery stores had gotten solved, but now we were struggling to get meat from our grocery stores. And then George Floyd was killed. And 5 days after that, a fire broke out in Cave Creek, the town where I live. Now, unfortunately, in Arizona in the summer, wildfires are somewhat common, but this fire was different. See, this fire started in a residential area. We hadn't had rain in months. The temperatures were high, it was dry, and the winds were strong. It was a Saturday, and my husband and I were driving home, and we saw that big plume of black smoke. And during a fire, black smoke is never a good sign. So we jumped onto Facebook. We have a local Facebook group for our community that organizes volunteers whenever there's an emergency. And so we jumped on there and got the details. They were ordering evacuations for 8 square miles. And the biggest problem with this fire is the area that it started in. Because not only was it a residential area, it's an area with a lot of ranches. So that means there weren't just a lot of people to evacuate, there were a lot of animals. And I don't just mean dogs and cats, though there were plenty of those too. I mean horses and donkeys and sheep and chickens. So we swung by the house and we loaded up the truck with whatever supplies we had in hand. We grabbed a cooler and some bags of ice and a couple things of water. And we drove up to this area in town called Frontier Town. It's kind of a tourist area, all of these cute little boutique Arizona style shops. And the owner of Frontier Town, Mark, had cleared out all the patrons and set up his commercial area to be volunteer headquarters. By the time we got there, there were already about 24 people there. And over the next few hours, more and more and more showed up. Some came and stayed to volunteer. A ton just came to drop off donations. And by donations, I mean bridles and harnesses and ropes, flatbed trailers full of metal fencing so we could set up makeshift corrals for the horses. People came and said that we could use their lands that was outside of the evacuation area to house these horses and animals until we could figure out what was next. People were donating their horse trailers or just showing up with their horse trailers ready to go. So in this residential area, there was only 2 main roads. And by main road, I just mean it connects to the rest of civilization. It's only 1 lane each direction. And so for hours, we funneled horses and donkeys and cows and sheep and chickens and people out of the evacuation area. Things seemed to be winding down. From volunteer headquarters, we could see flying low in the sky these huge planes dumping that red fire suppressant. It was amazing to witness. And things were winding down. The fire was about 60% contained. They were feeling like the winds had died down, that they kind of had a handle on it. And then we got a call that there was 1 ranch in the evacuation area that hadn't been evacuated. And it was a rescue with 26 horses. Many horses that had been abused or neglected, that weren't good around other horses, that wouldn't let humans handle them. So the great thing about horse people is they all know each other. And so people started making phone calls and they started finding the best people in town who would be the most experienced to be able to handle these horses. That was not me. So Dana and I went to grab some fencing, and the local equine vet donated space on their lot for us to house these horses, a lot of which needed medical attention anyway. So it was convenient to be right there at the vet. So we went with some other volunteers and started setting up the corrals while other people went and got the horses. And we had just finished setting them up when they came with the first load. At the end of the day, we evacuated, well, we didn't, but 860 people were evacuated from that area. And that volunteer group we were a part of evacuated over 250 animals. 10 people, 10 families lost their home that day. The local hotel, Tumbleweed Hotel, the only one in town, they closed their doors when COVID hit and let us know that they would never reopen, that they couldn't withstand the financial strain of closing during COVID. But that day they opened their doors to the families who lost their homes. We have a choice of what we choose to focus on. I could choose to believe the headlines that came out that very day about how divided we are, about how there's two opposing sides that can't get along, about if you believe in wearing masks, you should hate the people who don't. And if you don't believe in wearing masks, you should hate the people who do. I could have believed that. But instead, I witnessed right in my community that in the face of adversity, in the face of challenges, people come together. And it didn't matter what their political views were. It didn't matter the color of their skin or their familial status or their level of financials. When the community needed people, people came together. And that is a choice. In Genesis 28, there's this story where Jacob wakes up from a dream and he says, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." The one presence, one power means that God is always here at work in every situation, whether we know it or not. It is our choice to see Spirit at work. It is our choice to not believe the fear that is being sold to us, but instead believe in ourselves, in each other, and in the divine to make amazing things happen, even in the face of tragedy. The truth is, if you are looking for things to be outraged about, you'll find them. If you're looking for all the ways that our country is going backwards or sideways or forward, but in the wrong direction, you will find it. If you are looking for all the differences between you and other people, you will find them. But the same is true of hope, of kindness, of love, of grace, of goodness, of beauty, of gratitude, of God. If you look for those things, you will find them too. Richard Bach, in his book Illusions, he's the one who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagulls. Anybody read that? Oh, I love it. He says, what the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. So it's time to choose. Yes, it's time to choose our next president, but more importantly than that, it is time to choose how we are going to show up on this day and every day, how we are going to embody the goodness that God is with ourselves and with our neighbors, with our community, with our country, to choose to show up as love, to choose the understanding and the wisdom of God. That's our choice right now. And it's not about being naive or being uninformed or not being involved in whatever you feel called to be involved in. There are real challenges facing our community, and it's up to each of us individually to discern what is ours to do. Unity Minister Reverend Eric Butterworth, he says the most important political action we can take is to hold a vision of a world where love, understanding, and cooperation are the norm. We know in Unity, principle number 3, that it all begins in consciousness. Regardless of what actions we decide to take, we can all hold a vision for the world that we want to see. And that does make a difference. Sometimes I hear a news story or somebody tells a story about something that's going on in the world. And almost inevitably, somebody will say, what is the world coming to? You've heard it too. Look what's become of society. Have you ever stopped to think, what exactly is society? What exactly is a culture, a community? It's just a collection of individual people. Individual people like you and me who are expressions of the divine. Principle number 2, we are created in the image and likeness of God, therefore we are inherently good. Society is a collection of individual people seeking to express their divine self just as all of us are. Now, that doesn't mean that we agree with their actions. Just as we sometimes make mistakes or don't act the way in the ideal of what God is, so do other people. We don't have to agree with their actions, but it reminds me that every action is either an expression of love or a cry for love. So we can always choose to show up in love, regardless of what the other person is doing or saying. We get to choose how we show up, how we embody the presence of the divine, even in challenging situations, even when we disagree with them, even when we're scared. We have a choice. So we can complain about society all we want, but I'm sorry to tell you, the truth is we are society. We can complain about people, but we are people. It's up to us to choose what we are going to do about it. It is through our own healing that the world is healed. If we can focus on that inner truth, the world can be changed. I want to share with you a little bit about something called Ubuntu. It's a philosophy that comes out of the continent of Africa. And I'm not an expert on it. I have just an introductory knowledge, but it's all about the importance of community and that individuals contribute to the formation of a community and that the community contributes to the formation of an individual. There's one piece of it that really stood out to me. In the Ubuntu philosophy, stories that build communal bonds and healing are valued, whereas stories that are divisive or harmful are discouraged. So in these communities, the culture of the community is that we talk about growth and joy and interdependence on each other and healing and transformation. And we do not talk about hate. We do not talk about being divided. We do not talk about the negative. We only share stories of healing. Can you imagine living in a world where every person lived by the Ubuntu philosophy? What would it look like? What would it feel like, do you think? Think there would be harmony, peace? Do you think in that community we would feel loved, seen, accepted, and supported? That we would help each other, not fight each other? That we would see what we have in common and not what we have different? So this vision that we can hold right now for a world that lives by that philosophy of love, that is this that we're doing right here. That is the importance of spiritual community. Every Sunday when you show up here, you are greeted with a smile, maybe even a hug. And we're human, so we don't always get it right. But here we are holding the intention to be the change we want to see in the world, to be a place where every single person is loved and welcomed and cherished and uplifted and seen and heard and valued. You can imagine what the world would be like if everybody lived that way. Well, if one person in this room makes the choice to live that way, it makes a difference in their lives and in the lives of every single person they come across. And if we as a community choose that intention to be a place of healing, to be a place of bonding and loving and uplifting, that could change the world. It starts right here. Now is our time to choose. Now, it's not just me creating this community. It's actually hardly me. It's all of you. Everyone who shows up here with that intention to be in this sacred place is creating to the harmony that we're creating, is adding to the beauty and the joy of this community. So whoever has volunteered here at Unity of Verde Valley in any way over the past year, could you stand up? Anyone who's volunteered in the past year? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Whether we show up, whether we just smile at somebody, whether we sit quietly because we've got our own stuff going on and we don't want to talk about it, we're not ready, whether we actively volunteer, whether we're thinking about volunteering, no matter where you're at, you are seen and loved and welcome here because that is our choice. So now is our time to choose. In the face of fear, to choose faith. In the face of hate, to choose love. And in the face of division, to choose unity. Let's take a nice, slow, deep inhale together. And slowly release it, letting your lungs empty completely. Sweet Spirit, I know that now is my time to choose. That it is my choice to open my mind and my heart to your goodness and your grace. To choose to embody the Christ essence, to share my light and my love with everyone that I meet. Right now, I am reminded of a man from Nazareth who was facing political turmoil and high taxation, religious intolerance and religious extremism, violence. And that man believed in the power of love to overcome the world. He called 12 by name and created a community out of nothing. A community based on love, on spiritual growth, on forgiveness and understanding. And it changed things. So today, sweet Spirit, I choose. I choose to follow the path of Jesus, our way shower, to turn the other cheek, to forgive over and over and over again, as many times as it takes, to free my heart from the bondage of unforgiveness. I choose to not trust in appearances, but trust in the higher spiritual truth. It is my time to choose. And I choose love. And so it is. Amen.
Wow, that was great. Thank you.